Growing up, particularly from his teen years through to this time as a 35-year-old man, Lawrence has realized that he finds it difficult to establish social interactions, especially in situations where he is met with strangers or people that he doesn't so much know. And so, such interactions with strangers or finding himself in situations where he's within unfamiliar uh, territories, he experiences a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear that is quite distressing and also discomforting. And this is usually because in such social situations where he needs to interact with people, he is conscious of the possibility that he will make mistakes and be embarrassed within that interaction. He has this fear that people that he's interacting with or people within his social space would notice his flaws and pass negative judgments. He feels that he would always embarrass himself if he tries to talk to people, deliver a speech, and all that. Now, we all have the tendency to feel shy or a bit nervous if we are to do a presentation or meet someone new, go on the dates the first time. There's some bit of um, fear that we experience, especially for people that are not so extroverted, very introverted, shy. It may be something that once in a while you experience. However, the case of Lawrence meets what we have mentioned before, the bit of the behavior becoming abnormal because it is excessive, it is pervasive, and it is causing distress to this individual. Lawrence, in all other things being equal, may be experiencing or suffering from what we call social anxiety disorder, previously called social phobia, and it's sometimes also referred to now as social phobia. But social anxiety disorder is one of the major types of anxiety disorders that we'll find a good number of people with anxiety experiencing. And in today's lesson, we just want to look at an overview of social anxiety disorder, often abbreviated as SAD or SAD. And we'll look at some key tips that you can use to manage your social phobia or any other person that you know who may, based on the symptoms shared and a number of discussions, be experiencing SAD. Do note that this is an educational video, and if you realize or feel that you may be experiencing SAD, or you know someone who may be experiencing SAD, you want to visit a professional mental health practitioner within your jurisdiction so that you'll be given the necessary assessment, a more nuanced client specific assessment for diagnosis and treatment. I hope that the discussion today would be useful to you and that you find it as something that is enlightening. Now, what is social anxiety disorder? With the case of Lawrence, we'll have some insight into what is happening. So we see this lady here in this picture having fingers pointed at her, and these fingers are imaginary. This is what is happening in social anxiety disorder. In situations where the individual feels that others will evaluate them negatively, others will pass negative judgments and comments about them. So if this individual experiences such feelings of tension in many situations that involve social interaction, whether with an individual stranger or with a group of people, a public, space, an audience they need to speak to, or establish just, some relationship with individuals around them, they feel that that is quite a whole load of work, because now they are self-conscious, they are always evaluating themselves, often and almost always in the negative sense, looking out for flaws, looking out for mistakes that they could potentially make as they try to engage with others within that social setup. So there's this feeling of guilt, this feeling of embarrassment that is associated with social situations and social interactions. And it is mainly characterized by that fear of being embarrassed while interacting within a social setup. Now, in the DSM-5, the current version, DSM-5 TR, we see some key highlights for the criteria that should be met in order to have a diagnosis for social anxiety disorder. There's a marked fear or anxiety about one or more social situations in which the individual is exposed to possible scrutiny by others. So in many social situations where it is dealing with or it has to do with someone that the individual knows and is close to or is more familiar with, these fears may not exist. However, in social situations, at the grocery shop, at the mall, at the marketplace, at a conference, at in a classroom situation, whatever social situation it is, where the individual feels that the people around will be scrutinizing me, and this feeling or this thought is out of proportion to that social situation and whatever reactions should be happening. So it goes back to the 4Ds. You find that the thoughts and the emotional responses are deviating from what should be normal response to that social gathering or that social situation. It is going beyond what probably someone who is just shy would experience as being anxious. And it is also posing a danger to the individual, particularly a danger to their relationships with close people and people that they meet at work, in school, and in other situations where social interaction is important. So it threatens relationships because of that excessive, persistent, pervasive fear that others will scrutinize you in a negative sense and you feel embarrassed. So social interactions include having conversations with people, meeting unfamiliar people, being observed. So while in the restaurant or somewhere, taking some, sunlight or whatever it is on a holiday or something, just the fact that others are looking at this individual is a whole lot of discomfort. So you feel that as they are observing you eating or drinking, they may be, what are they thinking? What they may be saying bad things about me. If you are passing by and individuals are together, a group of people having a conversation, there's this feeling that they are talking about you and that they may embarrass you in a moment. Performing in front of others, giving a speech, talking to a group of students, talking to a group of colleagues or workers, these social interactions pose significant distress to an individual who has SAD, social anxiety disorder, or social phobia. The individual fears that he or she will act in a way or show anxiety symptoms that will be negatively evaluated, and by that happening, they will be humiliated or embarrassed and therefore rejected by others. So that is what is the pervasive issue with SAD. And you'd realize that this is now going into a more specific source of trigger, unlike generalized anxiety disorder that we discussed earlier, where the triggers are different issues or different areas of concern in the individual's life. So it's more generalized. But in SAD, we are looking at social situations, social interactions being the source of the individual's excessive fear and anxiety. The fear or anxiety, as we mentioned, is out of proportion to the actual threat which is posed by the social situation or to the social context that the individual finds themselves in. So if someone has SAD and this person is a teacher, over time, maybe if they are used to their students, their class students, because they've been teaching such students over time, they may not, experience those symptoms of SAD more frequently in their own class. But if they take themselves out of that particular class that they become familiar with, probably the headmaster and mistress says that they should teach another class or brings them forward during assembly to speak to the whole school, that becomes an environment that is very discomforting, because in that particular situation they are dealing with people that they are not so familiar with, even if it's the same school. And this is something that happens in different situations where they are meeting unfamiliar people or having to talk to a group. It's quite a distressing situation for an SAD individual. So basically, this is what is happening. Watch out, I will be embarrassed. So there's this thought, pervasive, intrusive thoughts that keeps coming as you are walking. You are just inundated with this whole bit about I'll be embarrassed. So you are so self-conscious, and at certain points with some severe cases, where the legs become wobbly, you just wish the earth can swallow you up, because there seems to be eyes all over looking at you, when maybe these eyes are not even interested in what is happening in your life. The group of people that you think are talking about you probably are even having a discussion that has nothing to do with you. But there's that voice, that sense of fear, of anxiety that is associated with being embarrassed by any social setup that the individual finds themselves in, particularly in unfamiliar situations or environments. These are some symptoms of social anxiety disorder. So inadequate assertiveness and low self-esteem. So you realize that such individuals, one thing that makes them prone to the pervasive, excessive anxiety is having a low self-esteem. So that is one potential risk factor. So individuals with low self-esteem and who are not assertive. Assertiveness is a very important trait. It's a social skill that can be learned. And I have a video on assertiveness. You may want to check it out in the cards after here. But assertiveness is about you being able to, make a point, communicate without, a fear of being rejected or embarrassed, while also doing your communication in a very strong and positive as well as respectful manner. So assertiveness is that bridge between being arrogant and also being timid. So such that you are able to stand for yourself, stand on your own, communicate how you are feeling, how you think about a situation or something, make a contribution without looking down on yourself, as well as not also looking down on the other person you are communicating with. So the where an individual is experiencing SAD or has been battling with SAD, you'd find that they have inadequate assertiveness. They are not assertive and they have low self-esteem. They are also excessively submissive. So you find a lot of timidity in that case. And that is what fuels that fear that I'll make a mistake and I'll offend the people I'm interacting with. I would say something stupid. I would embarrass myself. Oh, I can't help it. Why am I going to speak to this whole crowd? And this crowd could be a little number or quite a big number, and that also determines the level of anxiety associated with it. And so in interacting with people that are probably of a higher status, you find so excessive submissiveness, so much excessiveness in terms of being submissive, which is, really being timid and being walked over, happening with an individual who has SAD, because they can't speak for themselves in most cases, except, such a person is able to go through some help, probably therapy, or they have someone who is able to help them to build their self-esteem and assertiveness. There's this tendency to overestimate the negative consequences of social situations. So quite a number of things we mentioned in generalized anxiety disorder, where we talked about overgeneralization, making a situation look more than it is actually is. So and sometimes also picking the consequence of one event and associating it with every other event or situation. So in this case, that overgeneralization is done in relation to social situations or interactions. So where the individual is supposed to give a speech, for instance, or talk to a group of people, the negative consequences of making a mistake, or saying something that is out of or out of sync with what you are supposed to deliver, they overly estimate the impact that such little mistakes they may make would have on how the audience sees them. So there's this overestimation of the negative consequences of social situations and how people would evaluate negatively as you interact with them. So there's this catastrophizing happening, particularly with social situations and interactions. Overly rigid body posture and inadequate eye contact during social interactions. Once again, people that are shy, people that have, generally have a low self-confidence and low self-esteem may show some of these symptoms. But the main thing with social anxiety disorder, like we have mentioned before, is that the symptoms are pervasive, meaning that they are affecting many aspects of the individual's life, affecting relationships at school, at work, at home. Different aspects of their social life is affected. The symptoms are prolonged, meaning that it's not just a one-off, I am shy, I don't want to talk and all that situation. This is something that keeps happening. It is persistent and it's prolonged. So that feeling of anxiety, that feeling of nervousness, rigidity, happens for a longer duration of time and is quite distressing to the individual. And one other main thing with SAD is that the individuals try as much as possible to avoid social situations or gatherings. They don't want to be present in a group discussion or any go on a Friday night date or go on to the movies with people all around and all that. Yes, introverts, people that are conventional be they show some of these signs, where they are more reserved and avoid social situations as much as possible. But in SAD, this avoidance of social situations or environments, gatherings that will require that you talk to someone or engage in some discussions, persistently the individual tries to avoid them, because anytime they are in such a situation, they feel they will be judged, they feel they will be embarrassed, and that in itself is very distressing, and it's something that they would not want to experience. Now, there's a note. In children, the fear or anxiety may be expressed by crying, throwing temper tantrums, freezing, clinging to caregivers or parents, or failing to speak in social situations. So if although SAD usually the onset is from the teen ages onward, you can find it beginning even in earlier years in children, and you see the child crying all the time, excessive temper tantrums that are persistent, a lot of crying when they particularly are in a situation or social gathering that they have not become so familiar with. Now, note that children will ordinarily cry if they meet a stranger or they are placed in a situation that is unfamiliar. But if this becomes like a pattern, it could be an indication of social anxiety disorder. It could also be an indication of another of the anxiety disorders called separation anxiety disorder, which will be the next we'll be looking at. But in children, you find that excessive crying, throwing temper tantrums, freezing in social gatherings or situations, clinging to the caregiver and not wanting to let go, and failing to speak. In social situations, in school, they don't want to raise their hands to talk. When they do, they are forced to do so. They fumble a lot and all that. That could be a potential sign of SAD. And the earlier the child is helped, the better. So these are some risk factors. So temperamental factors, which I've mentioned, shyness, neuroticism, and other introverted personality traits may be, potential factors that could make someone vulnerable to SAD. Environmental factors, so negative social experiences, persistently being shunned by others, rejected by others, the negative comments, probably growing up as a child, a lot of criticism, the critical voice can, make it difficult for such individuals to grow into, people that can start conversations and would, feel comfortable in social settings, because they have grown with a lot of critical, judgmental voices that they feel everybody around them in many situations that they find themselves may be thinking negative about them, and they are likely to be embarrassed as they have become used to. So victimization, childhood abuse, bullying, family conflicts could contribute to developing SAD. Then we also have genetic and physiological factors, so family history, physical malformation, so people that have physical disabilities or challenges may if not given the right assertiveness training and the necessary development of their self-image and self-concept generally, they may have issues to do with social anxiety disorders. There are also some issues with some brain functions particularly with our emotion control centers. So a portion of our brain called the amygdala, where there's overexcitement in that region, it could, be leading to anxiety. So you have too much firing of certain nerves in that portion of the brain. So these are just some common factors or risk factors that could make someone develop SAD. So what can you do if you find yourself experiencing some symptoms of SAD, or you know someone who is going through SAD? What are some things that you can do and just to manage and cope with the situation, as you also make sure that you meet a therapist, a counselor, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a mental health practitioner or professional to help you address the SAD. So these are just some tips, self-help tips that you can do. And as previously we've had these tips, you'd find that in therapy, if you are dealing with a mental health professional, you are likely to be taken through some of them, and that would be a more formal and more professional help you are receiving, rather than you yourself trying to work things out. And that helps. Dealing with a professional who helps you with these things are really more effective. So the first thing is to keep a live journal. So this is similar to what we discussed under anxiety and generalized anxiety disorder, the thoughts journal, the thoughts diary. So in this case, you are keeping a live journal, and this live journal is just going to be a journal, a diary, a note where you write down how your day went. If you went for someone's birthday party, if you went to school and there was an occasion for you to talk, you were called on to give a speech, or someone approached you and tried to introduce themselves and all that. How did it happen? What was your feeling in that situation? Because that's a social situation. That's a social interaction. You want to just note down some of the things that happen daily in terms of your interaction with people. What were my difficulties in introducing myself to others? We were told to network, in that seminar, in that conference. What was I able to do? Was I able to talk to one person, two people, three people? Did I feel nervous in talking with them? Was it a short discussion? So just some bit of write-ups concerning your daily social interactions and how you felt and how you reacted in those situations. So you want to write what was the social situation, what was my thoughts in that situation. Did I feel that the people are judging me wrongly? Did I feel that I'll make a mistake? What was the thoughts that were running through my mind in that social situation? What was my reaction? What did I do? Probably I left the meeting earlier, or I left the place earlier. I saw a group of people having a discussion, and I thought, maybe they were commenting negatively about my presentation I did. So what did I do? Did I go and talk to them and find out, how did my presentation go, just to have an idea of how they felt about it? Or I just left, with that negative thoughts lingering on. So keeping a live journal is very helpful. It helps you, just like you have a diary. It helps you to keep track of your daily social experiences and what the patterns are as you go about your daily life. And as you identify these patterns by keeping a live journal, one thing that you can also do is what we call cognitive restructuring. And this is similar to think something I mentioned in GAD, the cognitive disputation and imaginal disputation. And in doing a cognitive disputation and imaginal disputation, where you are tracking the negative thoughts that make you feel anxious and disputing them, challenging them with alternative evidence, contrary evidence to what you think may be happening in that situation. So in cognitive restructuring, if I'm doing a presentation and there's this thought that the people that are sitting in that corner, because they are not smiling, it means that they are not happy with my presentation. Probably they are thinking of negative things about me. Probably that is, something that is happening, or it may not be happening. So cognitive restructuring says that there's the negative thoughts about that social interaction or situation that is making you nervous, making you restless, increasing your muscle tension, your pulse levels going high, and all that. Now, that negative thoughts of what is maybe happening, what the people may be evaluating you on, is negative and it is affecting you. So you need to restructure. So instead of saying they are discussing you, why not, now begin to say, okay, that may be true, but it could also be that these people are discussing a comment I made in my presentation that they found interesting. Or these people that are not smiling, probably they have some personal issues they are dealing with, and that is what is making them not to smile. So now you are finding alternative explanations to what may be happening in that social situation, and that helps you so that you don't focus your mind on will be embarrassed because there are some signs within the social environment, the people I'm interacting with or talking to, that makes you feel that they will wrongly evaluate you and embarrass you. So cognitive restructuring is just a procedure. So it's a CBT technique, a cognitive behavior technique that helps you. If you are doing this with a professional mental health practitioner, it makes it better. So they help you to recognize the negative thoughts about the social situation, and you now find alternative explanations to what may be happening. Explanations that will help you to now look at the situation in a more healthy, realistic perspective, seeing a better view of what is going on and having a better interpretation, so that your anxiety in such social settings would have been reduced. There's exposure therapy or graduated exposure, and this is where you know that you always feel nervous when talking to an audience. That is your challenge. And in such social situations, you feel a lot of anxiety that is very distressing to you. Now, in exposure therapy, what is done is that you are exposed to that social situation that you fear, that social situation that evokes that excessive anxiety. You are gradually exposed to it. So in a practical instance, you may now be exposed to talking to maybe little children, talking to them about something that you like or something they love, sharing a story with them and all that. Then you move on to talking to teenagers, young people, and then it's gradually moved to people that are older, and the number of audience you are speaking to is also increasing. So you can do that yourself by starting from, if you find that you have a difficulty speaking, so it's more of a communication anxiety problem, speaking to an audience. The children around your neighborhood, you want to start building a certain skill of talking to the children, telling them stories. If you have children, you want to start engaging them in storytelling, and then you graduate it to talking to your co-workers, maybe the ones that you find are less intimidating. Oh, today I want to share an idea with all of us. And so using those situations that otherwise are distressing to you, trying to expose yourself to those situations, it will be difficult. And this is where you need a professional psychotherapist to help you, or a psychiatrist, or whoever it is, to help you in that graduated exposure. It's similar to something else that we call systematic desensitization, where you are exposed to your fears from the least feared to the highest feared. And by the time you are, getting used to the fear inducing experiences and getting over them through the cognitive restructuring that is happening, through the skills of problem solving that you are getting, the social skills, the assertiveness training, and all that, you realize that by the time you are gone through that graduated exposure, you may have significantly reduced your anxiety in such social experiences or situations. So exposure therapy is one of the things that is done. Graduated exposure, exposing yourself gradually to the social situation that you fear, that induces a lot of excessive anxiety in you. Gradually exposing yourself to it. If you realize that you have a difficulty being amongst strangers, you want to start off by, in the morning as you are going to work, going to school, you meet someone you don't know, you say hello to the person, just, a good morning, a good afternoon, greeting the person, and they responded, rather than, what you would ideally do, looking for a different way, or, bowing your head and passing by. You want to challenge that fear by starting gradually with greeting, saying hello to people that you may not know. When you get to work, you get to school, at least when it's lunchtime, you want to go with another person. You want, as they are going, you want to say, hey, can I come with you? You may feel nervous, but if you don't challenge your fear, you will not be able to overcome it. So that is how graduated exposure or exposure therapy works. In a formal therapeutic session, you would be taken through more specific, sessions and steps. Another key thing is to engage in relaxation exercises, and this is something that runs through for anxiety, for depression, and almost all emotion related disorders or conditions. Relaxation exercises are important because, as it says, it relaxes your muscles, and your muscles, when they are tensed up, it has other rippling effects on you. So any exercise that helps you to calm down, that helps to untense your muscles, is very important. The PMR, deep breathing exercises, and other breathing exercises, mindfulness training, these are things I have mentioned in previous lessons on GAD, and I think anxiety in general. Focus on the positive energy around, and this is something that helps a lot. So if you are someone who would be giving speeches or talking to an audience, and that is always a source of discomfort, and you feel nervous all the time in such situations, when you are giving a talk, and that is part of the skills of communicating, you want to focus on the part of the audience. It may just be one person that gives you the positive energy, that positive vibe. And in mindfulness, what we would call mindful seeing, it's all about, within that social interaction, within that social setting, looking for one thing within that environment that you can focus your attention on. You would admire, you would draw the positive energy from. It could be someone who is smiling in the audience. It could be someone that seems to be interested in what you are saying. It could just be someone who is wearing something nice, a color that you love in that auditorium. Whatever it is, find something that you can focus on. The positive energy around, focus your attention on that. It could be your parent who is around, a friend, a participant who is smiling, and all that. Mindful seeing, mindful hearing. The things that you are hearing have an impact on you. So there may be a lot of criticism, there may be a lot of negativity around you. But mindful hearing says that even if there's one comment in that moment, in that social gathering, or a comment that someone has made to you before. You've made a presentation before and you were applauded. That should be what you should focus your mind's ear on, because the critical voices will always exist, but there should be that nurturing voice that you have developed, that you are always listening to, the voice that keeps telling you that you are good. Mistakes are a normal part of our human experience, and therefore when you make a mistake, it does not mean that you are stupid or you are embarrassing yourself. So these are some things that you should be focusing on, the positive energy as much as you can in the environment, the social interaction, ensuring that you are seeing mindfully and you are hearing mindfully. This brings us to the end of SAD. I hope you have found it quite informative and insightful. Once again, if you realize that you may be experiencing SAD, some symptoms of social anxiety disorder or social phobia, you want to seek professional help from a mental health professional in your jurisdiction. And even as you also practice some of these tips, getting help from a professional, hands-on support can be really, really helpful, especially because some of these techniques, which are CBT techniques, cognitive behavioral techniques, it takes time to learn the new skills. Assertiveness training and all that takes quite time, and then practice and all that. Cognitive restructuring requires a lot of persistence and a lot of practicing your new thoughts line in different situations, and all that. So having professional help hands-on is usually more effective. However, the tips are there, self-help tips that you can use for yourself or any other person who may be experiencing SAD. Don't just get up and diagnose yourself or another individual as having SAD. You don't just get up and diagnose yourself. Diagnosing anxiety disorders requires a number of procedures, including taking you through anxiety tests, a bit of assessing some other symptoms in different areas and all that. So it's a whole comprehensive procedure that you need to go through. And so don't be quick to conclude that you have SAD. See a professional and you get the necessary help. Before you leave, if you find this video useful, I would be glad if you like it, you share it, you comment, and you subscribe to the channel if you are yet to. See you in the next lesson, where we'll be discussing separation anxiety disorder. Stay positive and always be a blessing. Bye-bye.